You have to put that back in the time of the generation of the First World War, the enormous casualties, 888,246 British and Imperial soldiers killed in the First World War. It was the war to end wars. It had to be so. He really didn't want to see a major conflict in Europe again that would have been so costly. So that was very much at the back of his thinking. Yet, in the sort of analytical path that he took the Americans down, he knew that at some stage, but it had to be the right moment, there was going to be a re-entry into Europe. And he was very keen that that was not premature, but when it actually happened, it had to be done in such a way it was going to be successful. And therefore, as we say in the book, he put a lot of effort into pushing people to do the right thing to create the Mulberry Harbours, the pipeline under the ocean, and various other innovative things, like supporting General Percy Hubbard, the commander of 79th Division, with the tanks that could swim. But he knew if we were going to do it, we had to do it right. Not just the issues of command and control, but get some of the technical things right. And he used his convening power as Prime Minister to make sure that these things did happen. So, on the one hand, he was sceptical. On the other hand, he knew it was inevitable. But the big thing was get the timing right.
Absolutely, I'd agree with all of that. I mean, this idea of Churchill being sceptical about D-Day, it develops quite quickly after the end of the Second World War. Not least, of course, because Eisenhower, when he publishes his memoirs, describes how at one of the big conferences in May 1944, just before D-Day, Churchill had told the gathering that he was hardening on this enterprise, which the Americans immediately took to mean, well, he's been soft on it up until this point, and he's only sort of fully coming behind it now. And of course, that's been that idea and that sort of view of Churchill has been taken up more recently in popular culture by the movie Churchill, I think in 2017, which had Brian Cox playing the British Prime Minister. And that film starts with Churchill walking on a British beach and recoiling, as in his mind's eye, he sees the seas run red with blood. And it's this idea that, you know, history is repeating itself. This is going to be the Dardanelles all over again. And then that movie shows him sort of trying to obstruct the operation with 48 hours to go, which, of course, was not the case. With 48 hours to go, Churchill was actually down on the south coast trying to get on board a ship across to the D-Day beaches himself. And that's something we might return to. But this idea of Churchill's scepticism sort of took hold, and Churchill was aware of it and very sensitive to it and tried to respond to it in his own war memoirs. I think the key point here is that, yes, he always saw that ultimately you were going to have to go back into France, you were going to have to liberate France, but this was going to be an enormous operation, one that came with huge risks. So it should only be contemplated at the right moment when all the preconditions have been met, when you have mastery of the seas, control of the air, when you've built up the sort of tactical experience and expertise and equipment needed for what was an incredibly difficult amphibious operation. So he believes it should only happen when the time is right. I think he also believes that it shouldn't happen in isolation. He was a great one for trying to keep as many options open as possible. He wanted to take the offensive to the enemy on many fronts and not to put all your eggs in one basket.